Well, I know you're thinking, how the hell could you avoid these western tales? Red John, how far they got some losers. I've been messing around with from soft games. I'll tell you, Tom, no need to be taken, but writing has never been as fun as this. So now I finally played them all. Which one's the best of? Whoa. I know you're screaming off her, but it ain't that clear. So let's look at all my journeys and how these games have turned me into a blubbering mess of full-grown man tears. That's it, boy. Howdy, I'm Paddy Longlegs, and yes, I am a complete moron for missing out on all these epics up to this point. How could such an insane level of ignorance happen? Every housemate or friend I know has had Red Dead Redemption 2 in their library, and because of this, I've always had access to it and having like little goes. And by little goes, I mean, of course, throwing dynamite into cutscenes before they happen, throwing Arthur off horses, kidnapping people, killing them, and piling them up into piles of bodies in weird places. You know that we've all done it, okay? But because I've had all these kind of micro exposures to this game, I never had the curiosity to just properly sit down and experience the main story. And the other games, I didn't even touch them. But this blind eye needs to be refocused into a dead eye. And I know by this point there's so many Let's Plays, think pieces, Lego recreations, actor interviews, a weird whole fake Temu AliExpress merch scene. What the hell would a gap-toothed Brit with a misshapen cowboy hat because he ordered it for cheap from China have to add to the conversation of Red Dead? Absolutely nothing. Unsubscribe, unlike right now. But this is an account of someone fresh, playing the games back to back for maximum emotional resonance in the story. And you can see how I process this, to be fair, the most incredible story I've ever experienced in video games. So please, will you ride with me? This is So if I'm gonna do this western pilgrimage to become a gruff-voiced 5 o'clock shadowed gunslinger, I've gotta do this right from the start. Red Dead Revolver. If anything, Revolver deserves a tribute just for setting the tone of the whole Red Dead universe. Dan Houser's even said it's a spiritual predecessor to the Red Dead Redemption games, although we came across a campfire in Red Dead 1 that kind of refutes this claim. But this game's a bit of a Frankenstein of development. This was originally made by Capcom's Angel Studios, and you can kind of tell by these arcadey shoot-'em-up House of the Dead almost style levels. But then Rockstar comes in with its cinematic touch, and we just got this weird feeling of a game that I'm digging. Gives this game like a kind of Pulp Fiction-esque pacing, just weird cutscenes followed by action and a weird cutscene with a different character. But it's this odd mix of talents that creates odd results. Let's load our guns and discover this old western epic. That was smooth, Paddy. Red's father, Nate Harlow, returns home to his wife, Morningstar, and Red Harlow. Nate's looking pretty pleased with himself this time because he's come back bearing gold from Bear Mountain. He found this with his partner Griff. More on that later. Now, what does a man do in the 1800s when he's suddenly come across a load of wealth that he never really worked for? Why, you flex, of course. And what the equivalent of a diamond-encrusted Rolex is in the 1800s? Well, it's a shiny new revolver, of course. The Scorpion Revolver. Nate promises Red that this Scorpion Revolver will be his one day, probably so he can pawn it on eBay for some rent money. But he also reveals his partner Griff also has a replica version. This seems like useless information, but it's actually pretty damn integral. This reunion, however, was apprehended by a bunch of outlaws raiding their home. Luckily, we were in the middle of some shooting tutorial, which was aptly timed, and we were primed for revenge and defending our home. Young Red Harlow, clearly molded after the Dollars trilogy Clint Eastwood, is just a badass already as a kid, picking up a gun that's on fire. Not the only science-defining piece of this game, you'll find out later, and manages to shoot off the arm of his father's killer. Unfortunately, Red has not quite mastered Dead Eye so far, but just Dead Arm. Cut to present day in the 1800s, and 12 years later, Red Harlow is somehow a fully grown man. He's out for revenge, understandably, for the death of his mum and father from that outlaw raid. And from the look of his scar on his face, he ain't messing around, partner. After meeting a shopkeeper that crawls out under a cart for some reason with a giant bottom lip that looks like a botched lip filler job he's got done in Turkey, he distracts us while our damn dog gets John Wicked by the outlaws. If it's one way to boil a man's blood instantly, it's killing his dog, man. So what does Red do? Of course, he just kills everyone John Wick style. I think if Capcom took the reins fully here, this would just be an arcadey shoot 'em up with just different western scenes where you're shooting. But because Rockstar took a little bit of control at the end here, we are getting some of that Rockstar cinematic expose feel. This, of course, is done by their favorite delivery system in Red Dead, the train ride. Red walks onto the train and we're treated to some vibe-setting locals. We got one man with his guts falling out on the train, and we got another woman with the strongest jawline I've ever seen, which makes her look like some kind of Ronald Reagan drag thing going on. And as Ginger Mario greets us at the main town hub, Brimstone, Red walks out into a Rockstar Wild West for the first time. Gotta say, Brimstone was awesome to walk around in. Just the sheer liveliness of it. It reminded me of like Hyrule Town in Ocarina of Time or Kakariko Village. Whimsical NPCs getting on with their day, having their own routines, and lots of old ladies with the strong jawline of Thanos. It's here we meet the sheriff, aka actor Sam Elliott, who gives us the main gameplay loop of this game: hunting down bounties and collecting cash. There's some highlights in the bounty roster. One of them is Pig Josh, who throws dynamite at you constantly and protects himself by just shielding himself with cement smoothers somehow. He, unfortunately, has the Capcom curse of the rotting nemesis mouth, which I'm pretty sure they just removed from the Resident Evil game and slapped onto this 3D model. It's here we meet and free our first ally, Jack Swift, an English fellow after my own heart, who doesn't get a lot of explaining on his backstory, but immediately you're thrown into an arcadey, weird circus freak shoot-em-up game. I'm not sure why we're suddenly fighting the Joker, but here we are as an Englishman fighting a clown. This is just something we're going to have to go with in this game. The Desert Rocks Bad Bassie chapter was always a delight. This had some comedic moments where we find that botched-lipped shopkeeper again, where he celebrates his freedom too early and gets shot in the head straight away. But next up in the redemption roster for Red is Mr. Black. I'm sure this guy is going to fit in with the Western aesthetic again just perfectly. Mr. Black is basically the Gatling gun wheelchair dudes in Bloodborne. This was backed up by the graveyard setting. If you've seen any of my older videos on Bloodborne or Elden Ring, you know my greatest nemesis in boss battles is the damn tombstones, and here we are again. Next we cut to the bank and we're given a scene of a new character, Annie Stokes, who's asking for a loan for her farm. Pretty reasonable request. She's met with a response by the bank manager saying, "May I suggest you get into the escort business instead?" Can you just imagine this in a modern bank saying in real life today? "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your credit line, it just doesn't allow us to loan you the money. But may I suggest you become an escort, huh? Maybe whore out a little bit." You then play as Annie Stokes trying to protect your farm against outlaws who are just burning it down. Of course, we find out the real menace here is actually your own cattle headbutting you as you free them from a burning barn. Thanks, boys. I know what's on for dinner today. Beef burgers, huh? Actually, scrap that. Just seen a burning hillbilly in the barn, and that is some bad meat I'm smelling. And he's now a vegan. Something I do like, and as I mentioned earlier, was this game's Pulp Fiction-esque way of pacing its story. 1 minute, as we just said, we're at Annie Stokes rescuing her cattle, then suddenly we're switched back to Red. He's in a saloon, rescuing women from horny Gimli-like men. Then we're fighting a human form of Donkey Kong, but the ruckus is so loud in the saloon that Sam Elliott comes and throws Red in jail. This forces Red to say a few more words to the sheriff than usual, and he ends up revealing he's on a redemption arc to avenge his father and mother. Mentioning the bandit and how he removed his arm, this sparked a memory in the sheriff of who this potentially could be. Now look, this next scene is probably the most important in this game for just kind of connecting the whole story together. But it does not prepare you to understand it's that important, and you're just suddenly thrown into a scene where you're a Mexican general. Now look, this scene is probably the most important in terms of setting up the story and of the whole game, to be honest, but it doesn't really prepare you for that or let you know, and suddenly you're just a Mexican general fighting the American army. This Mexican general, of course, looking like a weird love child between Hagrid and Henry Cavill. Now, this guy's called General Diego. After slaughtering the entire American army, we are presented with one lone survivor, a whimpering hick. But to save his life, he reveals he's got some gold that he found with his partner up in Bear Mountain. But if he spares his life and removes his other partner, well, Diego could be a very rich man. Are you picking up what I'm putting down right now? Yes, this whimpering hick is Griff, the one that was with Nate Harlow in Bear Mountain that found the gold. And this little transaction of betrayal here is how they end up sending the outlaws to come kill us at our own home. So the guy we shot the arm off, who killed our father and mother, he was sent by Diego, so really, this General Diego's now on the hit list. We cut back to Red in jail with the sheriff, and Red says, "Where can I find this Diego?" in such a menacing Jedi mind trick style that the sheriff just straight up just lets him out of jail immediately. After a load of stealth-based missions that aren't really stealth because of the PS2's AI limitations, you can just walk through Terminator style and mow everyone down, we came finally face to face with our father's killer. Now, Rockstar have been very good at creating iconic names. Tommy Vercetti, Carl C.J. Johnson, Trevor Phillips. So you'd think that this man, who's responsible for the whole revenge arc of this game, is going to have a name that signifies terror and evil. Yes, this guy, the one-armed bandit that killed all the family we had in this game. His name is Darren. Darren. Yes, the name of the pasty worker that works at McDonald's who has the fake diamond earpiece in his ear. You can see why up until this point Red has been using the moniker of the one-armed man. It's a bit better PR, it rallies more allies to your cause, rather than, hey guys, let's risk your life killing Darren. Now we're let out of jail, we need to find this Griff and Diego. Now killing Darren felt kind of anticlimactic because the whole game was leading up to this, and now we find out we got two more even bigger baddies we gotta kill, Diego and Griff. But finding Griff is gonna be a little hard because he's risen the ranks in society and is now the governor. But first, Red's gotta deal with Hagrid Cavill. So now we've gotta do a weird train chase scene where he's hired a load of the monkeys for Wizard of Oz. And a train that defies physics. You remember this game likes to defy physics? Yeah, if you get rid of the carriages on this train, the train gets slower. Physics. Finally, we got Diego on the tracks, and Red finally has his closure and plants a bullet in him. Taking the gold from Griff as well, because for some reason Diego just keeps all his cash on him at all times.
I have gold! Lots of it! You can have it if you spare my life!
Red strolls back into Brimstone where we're pretty much roped into a battle royale. Now, in this day and age, a battle royale, I hear those words and I'm just thinking there's going to be a bunch of bloody popular avatars parachuting in. However, this is an old-fashioned shootout battle royale and we're shown our first adversary, Captain Hook. His actual name, Mr. Kelly, another weirdly anticlimactic name for a gunslinger, taunts us and Brimstone before the actual match, and we seem to get some kind of half Irish, half Mexican accent?
I do hope you're planning to attend the Battle Royale. I would very much look forward to beating an adversary of your talent.
After sloppily getting through some dead-eye contests, I'm not very good at these, we managed to put down most of the people. Governor Griffin has had enough of this winning streak of Reds and comes out bearing what we think is the Scorpion revolver.
I'm afraid of years ago. Isn't she a beaut?
Yeah! Can I hold it?
She's one of a pair, only two in the whole world.
Where's the other one? The other one.
Oh, the title is really come into play now. This is Red Dead Revolver. Governor Griff is not happy with Red's winning streak, so he causes chaos amongst Brimstone. Everyone running around, seemingly guns firing everywhere, when actually it's just NPCs going mental. After accidentally doing an Anakin on Tatooine with the Sand Raiders, massacring most of Brimstone trying to kill Mr. Kelly to get to the next story bit, we end up at Griff's mansion with Annie Stokes and Jack Swift. I'm sure this tale will be reminisced in campfires to come. This just seemed like a Scarface end scene, to be honest. We're just coming into Griff's mansion, say hello to my little friend, and bing bang boom. We're in a quick draw contest with Griff himself. We finally get redemption on Griff. He's lying there dead. The rest of them catch up. The sheriff saying, well, dude, you're pretty much a wanted man now. He was the governor. Red just chucks them the money he got from Diego and said, it was never about the money. Not really acknowledging what the sheriff just said, which is he's a wanted man, but that's fine. And he walks away, Red, with also a lot of money from the bounties, because that was the whole thing of the game. It was about the money. This was just a great little Western tale, a great primer for the big redemption games. I think the whole kind of mix of Capcom and Rockstar in this game, you know, rather than Rockstar just making a GTA 3 Western version, it actually worked quite well. It created this arcadey, fast-moving, linear story, which I think is really refreshing. I think narratively they spread it a bit too thin, probably because they had the ambitions of GTA 3, but they had the limited scope of the Capcom original game. But to be honest, it just creates a really varied and exciting ride. Red's story, though, was simple enough and served the purpose just right, I thought, for a Western. That kind of Clint Eastwood Dollars trilogy persona worked just really well in this. Because it was few words, it allowed the other characters to shine a bit. I also think he kind of gave the blueprint for the other two characters we love. The gruff John Marston and his long hair, and the non-stereotypical way of Arthur helping people as a gunslinger. I think it all came from Red Harlow and his little adventure here. And so, with a solid PS2 polygonal understanding of Red Dead's roots, it's time to get into the redemption arc. Bob Dylan once wrote, "The times are a-changing." John Marston hadn't heard that song, but Rockstar's favourite delivery system for narrative, the train ride, sure let him know in Red Dead Redemption 1. Also, nice to see, thanks to the Xbox 360 polygonal mastery, that the ladies on the train don't have the solid jawline of Thanos anymore. And the times really are a-changing. The FBI is getting its mitts into society, motorized cars are appearing, and John Marston, as he gets chaperoned by the agents, looks increasingly out of place in a more classy civilization. John, as a lot of you know, has been forced to hunt down his very family he grew up with, the Vanderlyn gang. And the first one up is this guy called Bill Williamson. Gap-toothed and thick as We've heard Bill was posted up in Fort Mercer. As we get dropped off by a laughing gap-toothed yokel, things don't look too good for John already. Now you can see Red's stern-looking polygonal face influence here on John's face right here as he stares down the situation in front of him. And oh, it doesn't look good and he knows it. Now the thing that is most insulting about this whole scene is now I've played Red Dead Redemption 2, I know what a useless moron Bill Williamson is. So the fact that John just gets sucker-shotted by the shotgun by Bill in this scene just makes it more painful. Sure, if it was Charles Smith maybe, who's a bit more handy with the guns, then yeah, I'd take this death. But this, after everything John's been through, he gets done by this? By Bill? The feeling of an end of an era really is felt in this game. Like, John is just a hunted animal. Even though he's the one hunting the Vanderlyn gang, you know really at the end he's gonna be hunted, even without knowing the story. And it gives this feeling of unease throughout the whole game, like you're constantly on the run. John meets Wes Dickens for the first time.
I'm bleeding like a badly butchered hog.
Quite a character, and we get our hand on some off-road karting for the first time. More on that later. We take a moment out of the chaos for John to just watch a nice film at the theatre. It seems to be some kind of Breaking Bad film where the guy is selling drugs, sketchy drugs, to unsuspecting members of the public, freaks out on a drug concoction, and kills everyone. Kind of like the film Requiem for a Dream, it's worth a watch. I think the big difference here is Rockstar had its full creative mitts from the word go on this one, unlike Revolver. And that means you get all the GTA-esque kind of goodies with the gameplay. One of them being buying your own property. Now John, already having been in quite a bit of stress, would like just a normal quiet base of operations. I bought this cozy little number, and as soon as I opened the door to what I thought was my toilet, it turned out to be a whorehouse. So that's great. They didn't even change the sheets for John, the dirty animals. John meets Annie Stokes' reincarnate, Bonnie McFarlane, who managed to pry quite a bit of backstory out of John, which was great. We find out John has quite a lot of parallels with Ichiban Kasuga from Yakuza, an orphan child who manages to find his way into some kind of band of outlaws who bring him up. And in John and Ichiban's story, they eventually have to hunt down members of their own family. This must be so conflicting to them, being forced to kill the very people that took you in. Can't imagine the hate that John must have for Agent Ross right now. He's literally keeping his family hostage whilst making him hunt down his older family. But now it's time to threaten something else. The consumer's trust. Yeah, that's right. Me and Wes Dickens have some kind of Breaking Bad relationship going on, and we try and push fake drug tonics on the unsuspecting public. There's even Breaking Bad-esque scenes of gore in the desert. There's me just skinning a horse, which would normally be just a normal cutscene, but it had my own horse behind me, screaming in terror as I did it. Or cheering me on, not sure where my horse is at. John's off-road karting again! There are some moments when the Red Dead universe narrative really comes together, especially when you play them back to back. Like for instance, I was just casually riding around, I see a campfire with a bunch of boys just sitting around, I think, oh, let's join the lads. I sit down next to them and notice they're talking about a guy called Jack Swift storming Governor Griffin's mansion. This is literally what I just did in Revolver. It felt so poignant.
Everyone knows about Jack Swift. He had the most lethal hands with his iron, but the most tender with the ladies. Has the world at his feet. He could have gone anywhere when they attacked Griffin's mansion, but he chose to stay and fight.
Yeah, sure.
He must have known it would be suicide, but he was there with Red Harlow right until the end.
Quit your yapping.
I was grateful I came across this conversation because it kind of tied Revolver to this much better. It felt like I was playing a cohesive narrative. Even though Dan Houser said this was a separate universe, this really did feel like it was tying the game together. Next, we meet a cultured fellow called Seth. Seth is basically Gollum.
It's mine! It's mine! All mine!
Oh, and Seth don't like women.
I don't like women, partner.
John agrees to help Seth find his precious treasure in return of Seth helping him storm Fort Mercer. Seth is a mentally unstable bloke and often wonders if we're in a dream. To which John responds,
I certainly seem to be in some kind of nightmare.
"Oh, John, you've no idea what's coming, man." One thing I really like about Red Dead 1's narrative is the strong character arcs. The will they, won't they Bonnie McFarlane arc, the Breaking Bad desert drug peddling Wes Dickens arc, and the necrophilia digging up graves in Mordor Seth arc. But now we're introduced to a new character arc, the Irish arms dealer Irish arc. We walk into a scene for this fellow which I take particularly personally.
Paddy bastard!
Yes, this Paddy bastard's called Irish, and he's going to help us get a machine gun to storm Fort Mercer with. It's tempting in this game. We get enrolled in another Donkey Kong minecart-esque level, and John helps a simple Jack type named Jed reunite what we thought was with his horse, but actually just mainly his horse's ass. This really was the personification of me getting sidetracked by absolute bullshit. Okay, this has been a weird day for John, so how about we take him back to his weird whorehouse condo and get him some shut-eye. And just as John's getting ready for a nice, peaceful, well-earned rest, he bends down to get into the bed and gets shot in the chest. Because it's the Wild West. Always sleep with one eye open. That's a lesson John learned tonight. Cut to the morning and it doesn't really get any better for John, as Irish has got a couple of nuns at gunpoint. Classic Irish, huh? That physics engine you love in GTA 4 is very present in this game as well, and I absolutely love it. It can get really cinematic in this game using the Deadeye. John helps Bonnie and a Tom Selleck lookalike herd up some cattle in a stormy night. During this, they pray to God for the help in this situation. John interjects with quite a poignant point, I thought. Is because of his past with the Van der Linde gang, he feels he can't even ask God for help. He hasn't got that right anymore. Can you imagine how alone you must feel in that time? A time when, even if you had no friends, you believed in like a God at least that could be there with you. But John didn't even have this. All he has is his family. John meets up with the marshal to round up some help to storm Fort Mercer after doing some good deeds for him. And just look at this ragtag group of morons I've assembled here. This is like Deadpool when he assembles that just ridiculous team. It feels like that. We've sent in Gollum to be some kind of jester-like distraction, and then we just mow down this fort with a machine gun. Unfortunately, Bill wasn't there this time, of course. We find out he might be around with Javier in Mexico. We don't know, so we gotta head that way. And after doing a nice little quaint boat journey, I thought, with Irish, he decides to just abandon me and give me a nice little insult.
You're an angry and a feck ugly man, but not a bad one.
Now you will know the...
And then the moment happens. Far Away by Jose Gonzalez starts playing as we ride into the night of Mexico. This really feels like Red Dead 1 has properly begun. Is Jose just hiding in a bush with his guitar? We'll never know. Sam Elliott makes another appearance, this time as Landon Ricketts, an old famous gunslinger. I like this guy. Giving John an ego check straight off the bat, it puts us down a peg.
Illiterate farmer crossing the river? No wonder you left America. A man who handles a gun as sloppy as you don't stand a chance.
I like Ricketts. He's the mentor John I feel needs after Arthur, and he just needs to be around a little bit more than he is in this game. But he does refine his Deadeye, so there is a gameplay use to Ricketts. Now me, I think Ricketts is a reincarnate, or at least a nod to Red Harlow. I mean, think about it. He teaches John the refined Deadeye technique from the Revolver series. I do love Ricketts, but he's pretty harsh to John. There's several scenes where John's just pouring his heart out to Ricketts, and Ricketts is just straight up laughing in his face.
I tried to stop. I mean, I don't know. I left the gang after the gang left me. Left me to die after I'd been shot. I got shot in a robbery. They left me, and I left them.
Sure.
It happens more on horseback as well, just Ricketts just pressing that blade into John's ego.
Yeah, who are you, John Marston? Apart from a rat feeding every other hand he can find, my name means something. All you've done is kill a few peasants, and the only real outlaw you've taken on dropped you like a bad habit.
Now, I politely ask you to watch your tone, Rick.
You must miss your family.
Low blow.
And what I love in this game is just there's so many insults that come John's way, and John's response every time is just a stern, plain look, just taking that abuse like a champ. John accidentally kills a guy going down a ladder in a plain view tower. Pointless to the narrative, essential to the experience. I actually love the NPCs in this game. Despite their AI limitations from that generation of consoles, they really do try and interact with you.
Hey amigo, you wanna make some money? Ven conmigo.
Some you can just hang out with and just take in the night sky, just having a peaceful time. John meets up with Al Pacino wannabe Vincente DeSanta, immortalized in GTA 5's Michael's FBI name. DeSanta dangles the carrot in front of John for the 50th time in this game, and he says he can give him an audience with Bill Williamson. Quite the prize. Now, DeSanta works for Ignacio Sanchez, the guy in charge in the Mexican army here, and he seems to be the great-great-grandfather of Nico Bellic, or Waluigi. It eventually goes south, as it usually does in the West.
There is something wrong. I feel it.
Maybe you just need to take a piss or something.
But this time we had opera-singing Abraham Reyes coming to our rescue. Reyes seems like your classic Mexican Robin Hood type, you know, sticking it to the big man, helping the poor, and gaining some riches along the way. The thing is, Abraham Reyes, under that nice exterior and weird singing, is generally the same kind of guy that John normally gets in contact with. A guy just trying to use John's talents to get himself ahead. Now, John just kind of shrugs this off as he's used to it. It must be the most frustrating experience. On a horse ride with Reyes, we actually get a bit more lore of John's past, which is pretty much why I'm playing this game. We get a little bit more insight in how Dutch was before the Dutch we see in this game. Apparently a charismatic leader, helping kids and giving them a home and a family, kind of Oliver's Fagin, if you will. I just can't wait to see how the unraveling of this man became the person that we've met in this game. After sharing a campfire with Louisa, it becomes obvious that she also is another one of these NPCs that I actually thought cared about John's situation. But nope, during this conversation it was made very clear that no one gives a shit about John's problems, even though he is an emotionally destroyed man. I mean, having your whole family captured by the government hostage will probably do that to the hardiest of men. John's patience, understandably, was probably wearing thin at this point, and he kind of interrupts Louisa and just says,
I have my own family to worry about.
To which Louisa just loses her shit and just rages on John. Well, most men would be like, aha, fuck you! But John just takes it. His ambition is true. He's going to help his family, and he will do anything and withstand anything to get the information he needs. Louisa really needs Al Pacino captured, and so we agree once again to help Louisa out. This works well because me and Louisa's boys do finally capture Al Pacino, or DeSanta, I need to stop calling him Al Pacino, and after making his face turn a shade of purple from beating, we get some intel from him where Javier is. After a lot of commotion, we managed to get in the same room as Javier Escuela. Now, once again, this scene, I think, has a lot of heavy meaning to it because of Red Dead 2, but we haven't played it yet, so this is just kind of an odd Mexican man with a terrible mustache. We decide to spare his life rather than kill him there and chuck him in a jail and spit on him. I'm sure this will once again have more meaning later on. Reyes and Louisa get captured this time, and it's up to John to save them, except he was a little too late and Louisa gets shot right in front of us. John immediately responds with a dead eye, and I'm not sure why we don't use this method in negotiations all the time. If we're talking to one of these generals who are quite clearly trying to take advantage of John, what if we just dead-eyed everyone around him and he'd be like, okay, leverage has been established. We do manage to rescue Reyes though, and I do remind him that if Louisa got shot, we probably wouldn't have got the break to get out alive. He agrees, of course, because he's a good guy, and he says, well, maybe we should commemorate a day dedicated to her. Lisa Day. What a perceptive leader Abraham Reyes is gonna be. John finally returns back to the city Blackwater, and this was quite a treat to walk around in, but our first character we get in contact with is Professor Harold McDougal. Quite the man, quite the lively man. He does eventually reveal to John that he does have quite the cocaine problem, which explains a lot about his demeanor. This actually kind of felt a bit nostalgic. It felt like GTA 4 again, where pretty much every character in that game has a cocaine problem. After a whole lot of drama in Mexico we just covered, and the fact we couldn't actually catch Dutch because of cracky McDougal over here by my side, John decides to finally just blow off some steam. So we get steamy drunk and start dancing to some ragtime. The next day all kicks off for John, which is not ideal because he probably had a stinking hangover from the previous night. But we managed to catch up with Dutch, and it all kicks off here. We're in a room, it's a high-stakes situation. Dutch has a woman in his arms at gunpoint, as leverage, and John's trying to talk him down. The thing is though, Dutch is a master manipulator. He starts ranting about John's wife Abigail and how she was an escort before the marriage and that everyone in the gang had their way with her. This is brutal. Tugging on the emotional heartstrings of John, it works. It gives Dutch just enough time to get out of there after savagely shooting the hostage he had, which wasn't really necessary. Showing us how brutal Dutch has become here. There is no empathy or human soul left in him. Agent Ross has had enough of all this antics by this point, and he brings out the big guns, literally attached to a car. On the way, of course, Agent Ross tells John to behave, and no. We get to Dutch's base in the snowy mountains. The snow seems to be quite a signifier of Dutch in all this series for some reason. You would think it more signify Harold McDoodle, if you get my drift. Snowdrift. John gets to the base and tries a sign-off after killing someone, which doesn't quite go as smoothly as he planned.
My name is John Marston, gentlemen. I'm afraid you're dead.
Still, he makes up for it a few minutes later when we catch up to Dutch, and Dutch tries to man a Gatling gun, but John ain't having it.
Son of a bitch! God damn it!
John finally catches up to Dutch, and it is a dead-end situation. Now, this scene has so much weight to it, like so much. It is a bookend pretty much to the whole series so far, except it's weird because we haven't experienced the build-up to it. So this scene is going to have a lot more weight later on once we played Red Dead 2. But for now, it's still quite the culmination because we have been chasing Dutch for a good 50 hours at this point. And Dutch, like me, looks withered and tired at this point. He's mentally and physically reached the end, I feel. You can see it in him, metaphorically and literally at a cliff's edge. Dutch points out in his last ounce of wisdom that he has always been replaceable and will be replaced because they need that to justify the government's wages. I think as he says this, you can kind of see that he's losing kind of his ego. He's realizing how unimportant he was all this time. And with that, he jumps on his own terms. I guess this was part of the plan? I think when this was released, this scene could have done with a few more flashbacks. Like, obviously, Red Dead 2 is basically that flashback, but there wasn't a lot of context to the weight of this scene, and I feel that could have been peppered in a little bit more. But if you revisit this scene, as we will at the end of this video, you'll see how momentous this scene actually was. After the dust settles, John heads back to Beach's Hope and has a horse ride with his son Jack. It's here we kind of see some really revelatory mindset of John at the moment. He's saying he did all this basically to just be a semi-decent dad. At this point he knew he couldn't be a great dad because of just the past he's lived as a father. But I just find this hilarious, like all the drama, all the deaths, all that rage and betrayal, all of it was all an effort just to be a semi-decent dad. I think John's earned his Father's Day card this year, huh? And look, maybe John's achieving this. Other people are noticing. As we were herding cattle back on the ranch with Uncle, he actually kind of muttered, signifying that he's noticed some changes in John. And it doesn't have to be positive affirmations from the NPCs either. If you're screwing up, they'll let you know as well. As I was trying to tame a horse, you could hear Uncle in the background just muttering insults to John. It was brilliant.
Use your knees. That's it.
John and Abigail finally get a chance to catch up, and this is great for filling in the lore. Now, we start to find out why John kind of left the gang and didn't trust him, as he felt the cracks were showing already in Dutch's leadership, and Abigail saw this. It's really cool getting these accounts from such a trusted source as Abigail, as you know she was in the gang at the same time. Of course, Abigail has some pretty good quips herself for John.
It ain't the first time I got a gun to my head, John. You're forgetting your marriage proposal.
Hi there, Future Longlegs here, having a slight issue with what Abigail just said there, because there was no gunpoint in the wedding proposal. There was a beautiful boat journey that Arthur Morgan died for, so John and Abigail could have this situation. So you didn't have to look over your back. So thank you, Abigail, okay? Abigail does express to John that she doesn't feel quite right, like this isn't quite over. She's scared that the agents are going to come back and just finish the job, if you get me. But you can see their parenting being at hand here. Like, despite the paranoia, despite the fear, despite the bickering between them, they decide to be strong, uplifting parents for Jack in the face of all this. It must be incredibly stressful to have this. After all John's done for the government, it must be insane to think that they're just gonna probably turn up and murder your whole family anyway. I used to think Goodfellas was the ultimate portrayal of paranoia, but I really think Redemption 1 is taking the crown here. John gets more passive-aggressive shit coming his way, this time from his own son. John notices that Jack likes reading books and asks if he's going to write his own book one day. Jack responds yes. The title will be The Day That John Marston Stops Shooting.
Now, I ain't no literary man, but I don't think that'll sell.
Now, I've had some issue with this because I get that Jack doesn't want his father to be a mass murderer, especially with all the stress that it brings. But he doesn't realize that John had to do all this shit to get Jack in a safe space. And to then just turn around and say, oh yeah, everything you did to save our family, I wish you would never do that. So after all that, he doesn't even really have the respect of his own son. But this little father-son powwow got cut short by the clattering of some hooves outside. I think we know what this means. And, guess what John's gonna have to do to get his family out of this situation? Some shooting, Jack. We join the fray outside and it is kicking off. Uncle's even moving like a normal human being. What's going on? Of course, he does get shot. Now, Uncle's death, you know, I had a little bit of a soft spot for him. I didn't hate him, but you don't really get to know him really well at this point. So it's kind of like, who is this Stinky Pete from Toy Story 2 character? What's his deal? Other than him ridiculing my horse taming, I'm sure it becomes more useful in Red Dead 2 when he's a little younger, huh? Beggar's Keep just keeps getting overwhelmed and eventually John just sends Abigail and Jack away. And it's this point that I just think it is so unfair and unjust for John. Now he's in his own ranch but cornered like a frightened farmyard animal. This is the repayment John gets for clearing out the famous Vanderlyn gang, a gang that no one else could take out. The redemption arc of John becoming a better man and father, only to be just still punished for his past sins in the gang. I almost feel like really John is paying for Dutch's crimes more than his own. But using John's only chance of a normal life and happiness, his family, as hostage and leverage so they can get him to do the things that he did to get in this situation, it's just so cruel on John. John peeps through the cracks. This is it, isn't it? And here we are, the iconic scene. It just screams classic Western, this scene. And this scene gets so much heavier when you play the sequel. Oh my god. All the transformative things John did in order to be a better person, you know, going from a completely lawless, doing whatever he wanted lifestyle in the gang, to being basically the government's bitch, all in order to just keep his family safe. And this is how it culminates. Seeing Agent Ross's smug, bloated, walrus face smirking as John gets sprayed with bullets just enraged me. And it only gets worse when Abigail and Jack come back and see John's disheveled body on the floor. We zoom out of John's grave and we see a much older Jack, looking like a cross between Orlando Bloom and Johnny Depp. The genes are strong in this boy. But as we zoom out further, we see that Abigail's gravestone is next to John's a mere 3 years later. Could this departure of a stable family life have led to Jack becoming an outlaw himself, failing the prophecy that John tried to build? I think this is like the saddest outcome of the whole story, is that after everything, Jack still became what John didn't want him to become. All I know is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, in fact just straight into the glass to make a strong cider, because Jack's drunk dancing is just as good as his father's at ragtime. We do, however, get some intel where Agent Ross's retirement cabin is. This is the chance at redemption that I was craving as a player. The only problem is we've kind of got to walk off this booze because Jack, for some reason, stays drunk way longer than John does. I had to speed this up because this literally took 5 minutes to walk this off. Now listen, at this point I've done about 60 hours of busy work for this walrus mustache bastard. So emotions were running a little high and my actions were a little sketchy, okay? Let's just say that me and Jack went full Anakin at Tatooine, okay? We find their retirement cabin and I find his wife and we charm her with some sweet talk from Jack. He obviously learned from all those books he read. And of course, We murder her anyway. Then we move on to the next location. From that intel, we find his brother, and we get some more info about where he's fishing. And of course, we tie up the brother and savagely burn and massacre him. Then we get to the place. Here, we're at another full circle moment, but for Agent Ross this time rather than Dutch. And the location that signifies Ross is always fishing for some reason. We'll find this out later. Either way, Jack plants a satisfactory bullet in Ross's head. Oh, it felt good. But that satisfaction quickly faded away, and as the credits rolled, I felt this immense sadness for John and Jack and the whole family of the Marstons. John was completely cheated out of having the chance to enjoy himself as a decent father. Abigail didn't live much past John, just orphaning Jack and probably turning him into this outlaw that we didn't want him to become in the first place. Casting aside his academic cravings and probably becoming his outlaw to survive on his own. It's literally what John didn't want to happen and was fighting for this whole time to prevent happening. And it happened. I do respect Rockstar for not just going with this stereotypical happy hero ending. This is actually quite a sad downer of an ending. Now there's theories that Jack does actually end up fighting in World War I and then gets reconnected with his academic tendencies and writes a book, and you can find this book in GTA. But I don't know if any of this is confirmed, and for now, I think canon-wise, it's left at a very unsatisfactory ending for the Marstons. However, I do think this opens up a lot of potential for narrative for Red Dead 3, playing as Jack. Overall, this was one hell of a journey, and I'm so looking forward to the other chapters in this series just to fill in the narrative lore. This is going to be hard to decide which is the best story because it's been off to a cracking start. But we're going to take a little bit of a supernatural detour right now and check out Blackwater again, and I've heard a bit of commotion going on there. Undead Nightmare. Released 5 months after the main story, I'm not sure you can consider this canon to the main narrative, but it'd be hilarious if you do, so we're gonna do just that. I think what I loved about this entry in the series was it just allowed Red Dead Redemption to just be silly. Let's face it, people, zombies have never been scary, they've always been hilarious. Ever since Evil Dead, it's just been comedy gold from there. So when you apply this to the already stellar sense of humor that Rockstar has, it created just like a really fun game. But despite the really fun arcadey gameplay that actually kind of remind me a bit more of Revolver in this series, we're here for the narrative. Let's dive in to this Undead Nightmare. And we start off with a nice little glimpse at actually the Marstons' family life before, Agent Ross came and ruined it all. And it's not all happy families. I mean, Abigail is a lot. She does like to insult John and Jack, it seems.
Is that better? Your lordship.
Of course, they see a load of commotion outside and get bitten, and both of them get infected. And after some pretty sloppy lasso and footwork from John, or let's face it, me, we managed to tie him up. And this is just hilarious, because John brings them into the bedroom and just leaves them a plate of food and just says, okay, well, I'll try and sort this out. The poor man is just doing the best he can in a weird situation. I think what helps the comedic tone of this game is the fact that just no one knows what zombies are in this universe. So everyone's just like, I guess he's got a bad case of the TB. John catches up with one of our favorites, Seth, because people are saying that his antics probably started all this weird bad juju. And to be fair, the first time we saw him, he was digging up graves, and we helped him recover some mystical weird glass eye. So, evidence is pointing to this guy. We see him at his crash pad, and it's quite a scene. He's got a zombie, but he's friends with it. I mean, I'm not surprised. We end up shooting this pal just because I wanted to, and I felt kind of bad about it, to be honest. But then I started thinking it's Seth. John goes to Fort Mercer and meets back up with Wes Dickens. Of course, he's keeping our Breaking Bad dream alive by peddling some holy water that's apparently going to repel the zombies. I mean, you just know because it's Wes Dickens that the opposite's going to happen. It's just great quality products, huh? Just what do you expect from Wes Dickens? Cut back to Seth, and it seems like he's actually done all right after shooting his pal. He's created a kind of Home Alone situation with zombies and a little dancing party like the cutout scene. You got to admit that despite this chaos, Seth is in his element here. We also catch up with will they, shouldn't they, Bonnie McFarlane, and oh no, she has not heard from her father in quite a while. Apparently he's holed up in the barn just down there. Well, we know how this is going to turn out. What I didn't expect was it seemed to be so weirdly cute. After getting into the barn, he's nowhere to be seen, and then he just pops out of a hay bale. Felt bad planting a bullet in this guy's head. He kind of was like a surrogate father to Marston, teaching us how to herd cattle and stuff. It was a sad time. However, what did cheer me up was the dead-eye moments with the zombies, as you can imagine, were just peak entertainment. Do you ever remember in those kind of early noughties films where it would start off with a pretty crazy scene, but it's in slow motion, and then you hear the narrator over the top go, "I bet you wondered how we got here, huh?" Well, I had quite a few of those moments in Deadeye in my head. Every time it went into slow-mo, you just see a zombie. I bet you wondered how John got here, huh? We finally reached the last infected NPC in this narrative, and Abraham Ray seems to be the culprit. He took what looks like the mask's mask from some pit, and that is causes curse. We have to do some reverse Indiana Jonesing for this and return it back, and then all is restored. Until Seth got lonely because I murdered his family, so he then decides to steal the mask again. How Seth knows about this, I'm not sure, but John returns to a well-deserved normal family life where he can resume just insulting Abigail's cooking. And after all the commotion of Red Dead 1, it seems we zoom back out of John's grave and he's a zombie. This is thanks to Seth stealing the mask again, but anyway, zombie John isn't really that much different. If you think about it, normal John was just kind of taking all the shit and grunting at all the crap he's receiving. Zombie John's pretty much the same. Well, that concludes the whole Red Dead 1 and Revolver arc, and what a journey so far. The thing about this is they have expertly set up this intrigue in me to find out all the past lore leading up to this. You'd think it's kind of ruined the story by knowing the ending, but no. I want to learn more about Dutch. I want to learn more about the Vanderlyn gang. I feel I've done the homework now to fully appreciate Red Dead Redemption 2. Red Dead 1 has become quickly one of my favorite games and stories of all time, and it's going to be hard for Red Dead 2 to top it. But I'm looking forward to getting to know this Arthur Morgan. So, let's pull on some coats. It's about to get snowy. Okay, so now we got the big boy, and I ain't talking about Bill here. We've heard the horror stories of development, of just insane work hours and amounts of days, and just Captain crunched into oblivion, I'm sure. But this has made sure that there's details such as tiny scuffed corners of a cigar box that 0.02% of players are going to realize and appreciate. But they're there, in their droves. So many details that for me, collectively, I notice and immerses me in the world so much. There's been moments where pretty integral information is being relayed to me in a conversation, yet I've zoned out because I'm just staring at the individual swaying tassels on Arthur's frill jacket. I wasn't even high. America has become the land of laws. Even the West has been tamed. These are the words that kind of set the tone of this journey we're going to go on. Just basically saying, you guys in the Vanderlyn gang, you're expired goods, buddy. It's weird seeing Dutch in this younger form of himself. He seems like a different person. Immediately, straight off the bat, he seems like a charismatic, empathetic leader that I can see why people followed him. Immediately, we rescue a recently widowed Sadie Adler, making sure she's warm and not as scared and comforting her. This is the empathy that I did not ever see in Dutch in Red Dead 1. Of course, all this empathy is kind of thrown out the window because in the background, Micah is either intentionally or accidentally burning the house down. We see Abby again in an almost unrecognizable polygon upgrade. I'm going to be interested to see how their life pans out in this to give me a bit more backstory for Red Dead 1. Speaking of that gruff-voiced son of a bitch, where is he? We see a bloodied up John in the mountains. I guess this is how he got his scars. We're controlling Arthur to rescue John at this point, but we've also got Javier with us, which is just a very conflicting feeling, considering the last time we saw him, we spat on him as we chucked him in jail. Immediately you get the vibe though of Arthur and John's relationship, and it is dicey and icy, and that's not just because we're up in the mountains. So here we have our new protagonist. Get comfy with this guy, people. We're in it for the long ride. With a jaw that could cut through firewood and a southern drawl that gives him both authority and the uncertainty slur of an alcoholic.
I don't care about your family.
There's two relationship dynamics I'm already interested in straight off the bat in this game. The nemesis-brother relationship he seems to have with John, and the father-son relationship he seems to have with Dutch. With Dutch even referencing him as son in certain conversations.
Have turned into my son. You worry because I worry. We are just the same.
I just don't know, knowing how Dutch turns out, this all feels so slimy and manipulative. Early on, you find out that the Vanderlyn gang's kind of nemesis gang is the O'Driscolls. Now, Dutch has a lot of beef with these people. Apparently, they killed his real love or something, so he's pissed and he wants redemption. So he brings his favourite son with him to scout out the O'Driscolls' base on a stealth mission. Of course, Arthur does not take the memo and just shoots straight away. Meanwhile, John's still looking like Anakin straight after Mustafa. We also meet our kind of second father figure, although maybe a grandfather figure, Hosea. Softly spoken with a kind of weird, almost Trump-like cadence. He exuberates wisdom and calmness, which is kind of the opposite of Trump, I guess. We go on a little hunting trip with Hosea, and here we find some juicy lore that gets filled in. Arthur explains how John left the gang for a year, and it seems that Arthur just felt betrayed by this because he felt like loyalty was the most important thing to this family. I do get this perspective, and now I kind of see why Arthur has so much animosity towards John. Of course, none of this fast and furious family matters when a bear is reenacting the Revenant on me. Arthur meets up with what I'd say this game's version of Wes Dickens is, except Arthur is nowhere near as patient as John was in listening to all this he has to say. Of course, shutting up this character,
He's suffering from exposure. Suffer a little longer.
Took Arthur's eyes off the road and a pretty horrific crash happened. Of course, Arthur learnt from this mistake.
Suffer a little longer.
After all that commotion, Arthur arrives at a saloon for some good old daytime drinking. We're treated to a montage of good drinking times, and then I hear this certain phrase. Now that has given me an idea for a brand for a rum for Arthur. Moron Morgan's Rum. That's it, boy. Like the previous games, random encounters with NPCs are brilliant. I just had a chat with this guy after some drinking until his horse just had enough.
Shit.
Now look, so far Arthur has seemed like a bit of a scoundrel. He doesn't seem as committed to family life like John was in Red Dead 1. But this allows a bit more freedom, I think, for conscience, because you can just be an outlaw in the beginning. You know, you can just cause shit and not feel too bad about it, because the narrative hasn't really got its tendrils into your conscience. But pretty soon after that, we start to see that in Arthur's past, he kind of was more than an outlaw, it seems. We catch up with old flame Mary Linton. You just assume that Arthur has been an outlaw since birth, being raised by Dutch, but you find out these little tidbits, which I love, about how back in the day he was in love with Mary and they were gonna start a family, but Arthur was just too early in this kind of gang life and didn't realize the hell he was putting himself into, and kind of chose the gang over Mary. Either way, Arthur couldn't have been that much of a scoundrel, as Mary still has clearly some interest in knowing Arthur still, and even asking for help. It seems her brother has had too much isolation and too many fake alpha male TikToks, and he's joined an Andrew Tate-like cult. We physically remove him from this cult and save him from years of just bad crypto decisions and return him back to Mary. I think Mary was really appreciative, and it's the first time we see Arthur acting outside his own interests. It gives him a bit more depth to start with. Next, we need to meet Micah again, and after all that commotion in the mountains, it seems like he's got himself imprisoned. looking like a scared dog in a cage. We've got to bust him out of here. I think this game wants you to dislike Micah pretty much straight off the bat, because as we release him from jail, when I think we're escaping this village, it turns out that he just is making a house call to some people that stole his guns and savagely murders them. They also kind of massacre a whole innocent village as well, but I didn't think this game wanted you to retain that information because it kind of messes with the whole Arthur's redemption arc thing. Micah is a complete rascal, and he just kind of looks like one of those guys you see that goes to the pub or bar at like midday and does a crossword, just sinking pints. Arthur once again flexes his fatherly compassion, but this time not for a guy in a cult, but for a boy that needs to be saved from boredom. Arthur takes Jack fishing. Now, it is a bit strange at this point because you wonder why Arthur is even bothering, like, filling in for John's incompetencies as a father. But it's this very thing of loyalty to family in Arthur. Like, it doesn't matter if he's not getting along with John, he still loves Jack as almost like a surrogate son or a nephew. And this gives Arthur, like, I feel way more substance as a person than your standard kind of live for himself cowboy. This could also feed into why Arthur is so annoyed at John, because he clearly cares for Jack and is seeing how John is just screwing up this relationship by going AWOL for a year. But this touching scene of reeling it in just gets interrupted by someone new to Arthur but not to us. Agent Bloody Ross, seemingly with his superior at the time, Agent Milton. They interrupt Jack's fishing. Now, this is quite poignant because you remember the last time we saw Ross and the last time Ross saw Jack ever was when Ross was fishing. But to start this cycle, the other end of the bookend, it's Ross interrupting Jack's fishing. Full circle. Arthur and John do later on take a walk together, and it's here they actually stop bickering for a second and actually start talking as, I don't know, brothers. They talk about how the world is changing and kind of leaving the likes of them behind. And I think in a weird way, you know, Arthur was kind of prepping John for what's to come. John seems quite dazed in the start of Red Dead 1 being chaperoned by the agents, but really, actually, I think Arthur mentally prepped him quite well for this. And Dutch also shares a moment with Arthur, saying some real manipulative shit to Arthur. Like,
Well, I was gonna say you're like a son to me. But you're more than that.
And as Dutch said this and pats Arthur on the shoulder, I just keep reminding myself, he's the guy that shot that woman in Blackwater. He's the guy point blank shot someone in the head in his base. This is an animal, but I am feeling his charms and it's very powerful. At this point, I want to impress Dutch, you know? The gang get involved in the tobacco industry when they manage to steal some moonshine off the people called the Lemoyne Raiders, who seem to be a rival gang to the Braithwaites. They, of course, stole that moonshine from the Braithwaites, so we're just quite cockily just trying to sell them their own goods. Thanks to a bit of a heated discussion, we do get invited into the Braithwaites and have some tea with her. It's at this point that Hosea really gives his charm and starts just blindly insulting Arthur to his face.
Some say he is as dumb as he looks, but...
Of course, Arthur has to just take this and just give the old Marston straight face back. You know, they didn't shout these stupidity insults to, say, Bill. No, Arthur. I think, to be honest, because the gang knew that Arthur could actually emotionally take this and stick to the plan, whereas Bill, I could just assume, would just fly off the bedpan and just reveal everything. Of course, this all naturally goes south with the Braithwaites when a little later on we start to see the repercussions of Dutch's greed. See, in that meeting with Mrs. Braithwaite, we organise helping them out by burning down the tobacco fields of the Grays family, the rival to the Braithwaites. Unfortunately, Dutch just couldn't keep that greed in check and also made a deal with the Gray family to steal some of the Braithwaites' family prized racing horses. Mrs. Braithwaite reacted arguably a little harshly here and just straight up kidnapped Jack Marston. John and Abigail are understandably absolutely distraught, and Dutch, probably feeling a little bit of guilt from this greed, organised the gang to raid the Braithwaite mansion. Now, storming the Braithwaite's mansion just felt like peak Red Dead gameplay. It was glorious. We had the twangy guitars going in glorious upscale graphics. It's reminded me of storming Griffon's mansion in Revolver, but just so much more epic. After all the commotion, we've got a climactic scene where we're walking out of the mansion. We've got Mrs. Braithwaite on our shoulder. We've just murdered her sons in front of her. That's why she's crying, by the way. And then Dutch just seals the deal by getting them to burn her mansion down as well. It's moments like these where I'm like, are we just well and truly the bad guys here? Are we just blindly following Dutch's revenge arc about the O'Driscolls killing his past lover? And we're just getting tangled in this horrible mess. I think this is kind of around the time that the gang's starting to realize this, especially Arthur. Arthur enters the city of Saint Denis for the first time, a beautiful, detailed, lived-in city that Red Dead has made, and it's incredible. Even little details like walking into a saloon bar and the piano stopping and everyone turning around to see you. Just peak Western gameplay. Now, the reason we're in Saint Denis is because Mrs. Braithwaite finally told us that she gave Jack away to a crime lord here called Angelo Bronte. A crime lord that uses influence and power in such a way that he pretty much runs this city and the politicians in it. We get to Bronte's heavily guarded mansion, and this is where we really see Dutch's charisma shine. We go from rifle barrels in our face about to just off us, because they don't care, they get away with it, they run this city, to suddenly we're in Angelo Bronte's living room having drinks with him. Within seconds. What the? These moments are important because it kind of reaffirms why the gang kind of follow Dutch. You see Dutch as this horrible man that you'd never follow, but at this time he was so charismatic. Pair that with the insecurities he exploited with each member of the gang, it's no wonder he had a strong hold of the Vanderlyn gang. You can see this with Arthur, like Dutch can see the loyalty that Arthur has for the concept of family, so he always refers to him as son. It's so manipulative. But to be honest, in situations like this, when you're sitting in a crime lord's living room, you want a wordsmith like this covering your back. We eventually bring Jack back, and the look that Abigail gives John is just, well, we're used to it, and I think this is the beginning of the silent, angry stare towards John arc. Bronte then shows some select members of the gang the high society of Saint Denis by inviting them to a party hosted for the mayor there. Now, the problem is, I think Dutch must have drank some like 100 proof moonshine with Bronte, because the people he decided to bring to this party was Arthur, yeah, that's fine, he washes up good. And fucking Bill. Why Dutch thought this moronic juggler of words would fit into this particular situation, I don't know. Let's just look at this Renaissance man at his best, huh?
I come from the west. I mean the north. The northwest. Don't you think? Well, I don't quite understand. I'm an American.
Yes, but what do you do?
Well, I'm in between jobs at the moment.
Arthur helps old flame Mary Linton again, but this just ends up with me trying to sort out her father's gambling addiction. It's weird. Arthur in a conversation also says a line I think is great. But
I'm the best guy you know at frightening decent people.
Pretty insightful comment from Arthur, kind of knowing his place in the world. I tell you where he doesn't know his place though, is at the theatre with Mary, just heckling.
Do not doubt. I walk the horse manure gate in this locality
just
as a
starting
proprietor.
Saint Denis stinks. Seriously, we need another act. Sing about you.
We come face to face with the legendary alligator in La Grasse. Now, I bring this scene up for two pivotal moments, I think, for the narrative. The first one seems pretty meaningless to start with. It's just a gentle cough from Arthur.
Leaving love aside, you think we got this?
Of course, we know from the beating of Thomas Downs that this is quite significant, but for now, it was just a small little sign. But the second main one I want to bring up is what I think is the pivotal start of the downward turn for Dutch. A scene where he essentially turns into the Dutch we knew from Red Dead 1. The gang gets Bronte on a boat after a robbery in Saint Denis goes pretty bad, and we're pretty sure Bronte tipped the police off about us. Fair enough. Now, the main point of this whole boat journey, I think, was to send a message to Bronte that the Vanderlyn gang can get any man, no matter how powerful he is, alone with them at their mercy on a boat. And that's exactly what they did. This was to just send a message. Now, I think Dutch was on course for this plan until Bronte just took it too far and just spitefully insulted Dutch. You can see the spite on Bronte's face as he says this, and then you can see the cracking of the mind of Dutch as he's doing it, his eye twitching almost. And this to me is where Dutch crossed the Rubicon. This is where Dutch officially started to become the man we knew in Red Dead 1. What was meant to be a simple waterboarding scare tactic turned into a full-on strangling fest. You can see the gang kind of urging Dutch to stop, but Dutch just went all the way and drowned Bronte. Not only is this, I think, where Dutch truly mentally cracks, but also when he loses the respect of the gang itself. You can see him just looking at him in horror at the lack of control he just exhibited. Even John pointing it out.
Jesus. What part of your philosophy books cover feeding a fella to a goddamn alligator, Dutch?
Now, what doesn't help keep the gang intact as well is the serpent on people's shoulder, Micah. And this time he went for Arthur. Now, you'd think with all the animosity you've seen between Arthur and John, that Micah would have a pretty easy time convincing Arthur to mistrust John. But the thing is, I don't think Micah quite understood the dynamic here. See, like, Arthur is annoyed at John because of the middle finger he did to the loyalty of the family. Arthur and John are like brothers, and this shouldn't be confused with hate or mistrust. It's just he's angry that his family member went AWOL for a year. Do you think Arthur would be this annoyed if, say, the cook Simon Pearson left, or f***ing Bill? No. And this backfired Micah's plan spectacularly because now Arthur really mistrusts Micah. During a bank robbery, which we had to do because of ever-dwindling funds in the camp, we get ambushed by Leviticus Cornwall. This is the guy who's bankrolling Agent Ross and Agent Milton. In a way, Leviticus is the main bad guy of the whole thing. Amidst the flying bullets and slurs, you can hear Dutch just quietly praising Hosea. Now, this put me on edge because if you've seen enough action films or any kind of video game with a narrative, you know that whenever someone is praised out of context to the situation happening around them, or they start saying things like, "This is one more day till I get to retire," then you know that person is going to die. And yes, he gets shot right in front of us. It's horrific. Now, this actually hit me hard that despite you haven't seen much gameplay footage of Hosea in this video, I spent so much time just sitting alone with him at the camp, just kind of hearing his soothing voice and wisdom at Arthur. I think Arthur as a character really appreciated Hosea as well as a kind of grandfather figure. It's safe to say that Hosea was the glue to the Van Halen gang, and for a gang that's already cracking at the seams, losing this glue was the final straw, I think, in the stability of the gang. Then bam, poor Lenny gets shot down. You can tell Arthur really liked Lenny. Ever since getting hammered with him in Valentine, Arthur's always suggested Lenny go on a heist with him and always recommends him in good stead. So when Lenny got shot down, you really saw Arthur spend that extra few seconds saying goodbye to him, and it felt real heavy. But somehow the survivors of the Van Halen gang get on a stowaway ship that seems to be conveniently setting off during this bloodshed. It all seems to be plain sailing for the gang. They got out of a dicey situation there until a storm hits, and then we wake up on a deserted island and a bullshit gameplay loop where you walk really slow. Chapter 4, Guarma. Now this is your standard kind of, there's locals here who don't like these people washed up, we gotta fight our way out and find another ship back to the mainland. And during all of this, Dutch and Arthur get some alone time. Of course, this all gets interrupted by another crossing of the Rubicon with Dutch. We had to get an old kind of weird lady to give us a guide around these caves, and she starts insulting Dutch again. Now, I get nervous because I know that Dutch doesn't like to be insulted. He gets real handsy round the gullet. And surprise, surprise, Dutch suddenly snaps and strangles this woman right at the ladder. You can see on Arthur's face, like, this guy isn't stable anymore. Then immediately after, Dutch has his famous line, "I'm doing the best I can." Can we just take a second to realize how insane that is? Imagine seeing someone just strangle someone to death and then immediately after, "I'm just doing the best I can." What? After a seriously dehydrating holiday in Guam, which did not do Arthur's TB any good, we get back to the gang and it kicks off because it turns out Molly O'Shea was the snitch for the gang. It seems that her love for Dutch and his constant treating her made her, some reason, cause treason, possibly for attention. Either way, her reasoning got cut pretty short by a swift shotgun to the stomach by Susan She Knew the Rules Grimshaw. Does this mean that Dutch will trust John a bit more now? I think that boat's already sailed somehow. Arthur's in St. Denis again, and he coughs like he spent the night in Snoop Dogg's tour bus and falls off his horse. Of course, this means there's another stumbling bullshit walking gameplay section all the way to the doctors. And as we suspected, it's not looking good for Arthur. Now, doctors back then seemed to be like just the harbingers of bad news with no real solutions, because there was no real cures. They basically just told you how you were gonna die. Basically like WebMD today. Now in the scene in the doctors, this for me really is when Arthur got more depth for me and he turned into a completely different character. It's here where you see the fear in Arthur's eyes, that it completely shatters this previous notion I had of him as this just real gruff, completely unbreakable outlaw cowboy. And actually you start to see him more as a human being here. Suddenly he's scared. He doesn't want to die, and suddenly he's faced with mortality way too early in when he thought he had to. In fact, part of me thinks that Arthur really never thought he'd have to face this situation. He'd just get, blacked out by a bullet in the head. Easy, done. But now Arthur's faced with a whole existential crisis in his head. As Arthur walks out the doctors, you hear this kind of montage of echoing thoughts from other people and himself, and you can tell this is a real perspective shift for Arthur as a character.
Don't make me beg you, Arthur.
Who made you the messiah to these lost souls?
And you've as good as killed him yourself.
You will die, savagely, all of you.
Arthur and Sadie go hot balloon riding, and not for a romantic landscape, but to seek out where John's been kept prisoner. He needs rescuing. And Arthur and Sadie are the only ones willing to do this, it seems. Of course, scouting John's prison location isn't the only obstacle they have. Before that, they have good old-fashioned sexism to get past.
Is she coming?
Well, women can't fly, sir. Are you insane?
They can.
Oh, no, sir. It does terrible damage to them, to their vapors. A delicate flower like Mrs. Adler? Heavens above or below.
After we get the location, Arthur and Sadie start their rescue mission for John. And can we just take a minute to just appreciate Sadie Adler for a second? She went from a whimpering widow in the beginning of this game to one of the most badass outlaws in the gang, seemingly in weeks. And can we also appreciate Chimp Arthur? When Arthur's just running around in stealth mode, it is the most entertaining movement I've seen in a character in a while. After a big gunfight and a bit of a hostage tight-knit situation, we get John out of this prison, and you can tell John is really appreciative of this for Arthur. You can tell they don't really show it to each other, but they show up for each other. And it's here we really start to see the cracks in Arthur and Dutch's relationship. It's here where Arthur said he insists on going off on his own accord to rescue John, despite Dutch telling him not to do it. And Dutch is getting confused. Why is Arthur suddenly getting this independence? Why is Arthur suddenly pairing off with the one person he complains about the most in the gang? I don't think Dutch is clued in on, obviously, Arthur's perspective-changing illness that he's got, so he's just confused at this point. After this, we pass John and Bill muttering to each other in the camp, and Bill says something pretty pathetic.
You know, you'll get what's coming to you. Oh. Poor John.
Charles wants Arthur to talk to Rainsfall, this Indian chief, to try and sort out the situation there. Of course, Arthur obliges. He's quite fond of Charles. And we get there, and it's quite a good mission to do because you get a lot of background lore on Arthur again. For instance, Arthur had a son. Apparently, he had quite the relationship with a waitress called Eliza, and they had a son, Isaac. Arthur's telling this heartbreaking story about how he nearly had a chance to be a family man, but then they were killed over a measly $10 in a feud. Of course, mid-sentence, finding out all this information, it seems quite evident that Rainfalls does not give a damn about Arthur's sad story, because midway through this, Rainfalls interrupts him to pick up some ginseng.
Pardon me. Feeling that kind of... Wait, stop here. I want to pick some ginseng.
Clearly Rainfalls has more priority over making his damn homemade energy drink at home, it seems, than listening to Arthur's poor sad story. Before Arthur gets rudely interrupted by this Red Bull moonshining Indian chief, Arthur was saying how good things just don't happen to men that live bad lives. And this hit me hard. It reminded me of that cattle herding scene in Red Dead 1, where John's saying that he doesn't feel he can ask anything of God because of the past sins. So he truly feels alone. I think after the family got taken from Arthur, Arthur felt this as well. Can I say, if this happened to Dutch, he would use this as such fuel to just do a tirade of violence and revenge. But I think because Arthur got this debilitating TB, he didn't go down that route of perspective. Instead, he's gone down this route where he needs to just make some good things happen for people to make his soul feel okay when he's on his inevitable deathbed. And this, I feel, is the main gameplay loop for the rest of this game. Dutch has become so intolerable as well in the gang that even junkie alcoholic Reverend Swanson is leaving and got sober because of it. Before leaving, though, he commends Arthur's actions, saying that there's still a chance for him to be a good man. I think Arthur really needed to hear this, because I think Arthur was just running on fumes emotionally. He was just like, I should do these good things, but I'm always going to hell. We get more time with John, and it's here that they really start bitching about Dutch. And I think it's here where Arthur plants the seeds really in John's head to just get the hell out of this life. He tells John when the time is right, you, Abigail, and Jack have got to run. And I don't think John really took Arthur seriously until Arthur started saying how the loyalty in the gang is dead. And if there's one thing Arthur doesn't fuck around with, it's loyalty, as we know. I feel Arthur has fully accepted John as a brother and a family member, and this is his last good deed to get his family out. But the gang isn't completely disbanded yet. They haven't fully fallen out. So they do one of their last hurrahs, and this is helping Rainfalls' son, Eagle Flies. Now, normally this would be a stupid distraction and a waste of time, but I think Dutch wanted to do this to create a distraction for the agents so he could do his other plan. Either way, it didn't quite go to plan, and Dutch and Arthur get cornered on a cliff's edge. Dutch should get used to this, but either way, the only way out was to reenact that scene from The Other Guys with Samuel L. Jackson and The Rock. And of course, the rescue mission for Eagle Flies goes pear-shaped, as it should, and we're in a situation which I think is another pivotal moment in Arthur's perspective of Dutch, and really another Rubicon crossed by Dutch. As we're fighting, Arthur gets into a situation where he's nearly at death's door, being overpowered by some other dude. Now, fortunately, we can see Dutch in an earshot, and he could just shoot the guy or push him off, it doesn't matter, easily saved. But then we see one of the most chilling scenes I think I've seen in this game. Is because I really didn't expect this, but you see Dutch just walk away, and then that's backed up by the look Arthur gives Dutch when he gets out, and I don't want to receive that look from any man in my life. The betrayal nail was hit further on the head when Dutch decides to listen to Micah after finding out Abigail's been captured by Agent Milton. Dutch decides, on Micah's advice, to go for this money heist instead of going for Abigail. Now, as you can imagine, this might have hit Arthur particularly hard, not to mention John, of course, but for Arthur, this whole family thing, I think Dutch doing that finally said to Arthur that Dutch does not give one single damn about loyalty or family anymore, and therefore, I think Arthur was completely done with Dutch at this point. You can tell by the other mean look Arthur gives him. Arthur goes straight to rescue Abigail, as he should. It's in this confrontation that, of course, we get the confirmation from Agent Milton that Micah is indeed the rat. Not really surprising at all. I think Arthur here was less surprised. You could see it in his face, and I think he was just bummed that he knew the shitstorm that's going to await him in the camp. Confronting Micah, getting Dutch to believe him, it's going to be a whole ordeal. And on the way back to this show of a family dispute, we get one of the most beautiful moments in the series. That's the way it is. What a song. Echoing through the forest as we gallop. Here we kind of just feel the culmination of just everything Arthur's been through and the progress he's made. And God, I was proud of this man. I was crying up. Arthur arrives at the camp, delivers the news, and naturally we're at a standoff. This is what happens with family disputes in outlaw gangs. We're in a standoff now. It seems to be Arthur and John versus Micah, Dutch. This is what's left of the Vanderlyn gang, and we're in a weird position of knowing the futures of Bill and Javier, but I honestly at this point did not know where the rest of this was going to go. Now obviously we've witnessed Dutch unraveling mentally, but would he really be this far gone that he'd just shoot his surrogate son over Micah? Unfortunately this is split up by the Pinkertons crashing the party and we all just scatter. Arthur and John get away, and this is where you really see John appreciating Arthur for who he is and what he's become. He just says there, "Thank you, brother." I think John saying these words to Arthur just made it a full circle where their relationship blossomed to what it really should have been. If you think about it, Arthur was always there for John in the snowy mountains, getting him out of prison, and now back up in the mountains, full circle.
That is kind of brilliant.
I ask you a favor, because he likes you, and, well, you know his father's useless.
Arthur, ain't that dumb?
Next time, let the wolves eat all your brain. Then you'll be a genius. We was family, you know? Don't go too close to the water here, Jack.
I won't, Uncle Arthur.
I know you have your doubts about him too, Morgan.
I got no doubts about John. I've known him for 15 years.
Hey, Arthur. Thank you.
Don't mention it.
What about loyalty?
Be loyal to what matters. When the time comes, you gotta run and don't look back. It would make me feel good, if that makes any sense. Abigail's safe. So's Jack. Where are they? It was Sadie and Copperhead Landing. Thank you, brother.
The way we're galloping through the forest as well from Agent Milton's men, and something doesn't feel right, and yep, Secretariat takes his last bullet. This hit me harder than I thought it would. We've been through so much with your horse. You spend so much time with them, grooming them, patting them. That's it, boy. And then suddenly he's down, and you can tell Arthur himself, let alone me, Arthur is just so sad about this. Spending so much time with the fallen Secretariat, bullets flying past him, you don't get it. And there he says, "Thank you." It was such a beautiful moment. I was bawling my eyes out, and this isn't even a person yet. It's also a bit later here that Arthur just stops and just turns to John and goes, "You've got to go from here." Normally John just says, "Come on, man," but he can see it in Arthur as well. And as Arthur puts his hat on John, oh man, this is a heavy scene. I mean, everything we've been through to this point, and just seeing that, passing the baton to John. This is where Red Dead 1 started. I think the beautiful thing here is that Arthur was released in this moment. Whatever happens after this, he doesn't care. But knowing that he got John and Abigail and Jack away from this life safely out, Arthur has fulfilled his redemption. This must have felt good if he wasn't just coughing his guts up. But Arthur ain't done here. There's one last thing he's got to do. And it's something I'm really jealous I couldn't do myself. Beat the shit out of Micah. After a very frustrating brawl between Micah and Arthur, which looked like two drunk men who were convinced each other had each other's car keys and were scrambling for them, Dutch catches up just as Arthur's at his very end. And Arthur looks to Dutch and just says, "I gave you everything I had." Probably the most disarming sentence that he could say to Dutch, and you can tell because Dutch's expression just changes right there. It looks like worry, looks like sadness. No longer is it anger and revenge in Dutch's face. I think this was another thing that broke Dutch. Arthur also points out that only John won, and I think Dutch for once didn't want to argue this. He was like, "Yeah, I think you're right." And just like that, Arthur is left on his own to watch the sunset. Such a poignant moment, so heavy. I think the sad thing about this story and Arthur's story was all Arthur wanted was a family. All he wanted was a good life for the people he cared about, and he never really got to achieve that for himself. But I think in this moment, he was proud of himself, and he undid a lot of the bad juju he's kind of lived from his life. I think the way Arthur acted towards the end of this game set the blueprint of how John should act. And the fact that Arthur put his hat onto John was like the last stage of that, just saying, I've taught you everything I know now. Now be a man, be a father. And just like that, we're back to being John. And after all that's happened, the betrayal, the violence, the action, the suspense, after all that, we're left at the end of the game scooping up manure and putting our arm in a cow's hoo-ha. Yes, there seems to be a farming simulator tacked on at the end here, and it took me a while to realize why all this pointless shit was here. John then bumps into Uncle, who I largely avoided actually in this game, so I didn't really get annoyed by him, but you can't escape him, I'm afraid. The thing about this epilogue is you actually start to realize why Uncle is about. It's actually Uncle who was pushing John to get his shit together in this new life of his. It was Uncle that pushed John to get a new ranch built for Beach's Hope. It's not like Uncle leads by example, but it's instrumental in making John the man he became. And it's thanks partly due to Uncle. After all that farming simulation, John and Abigail saunter into Blackwater to get their photo taken. Now, at this point, I'm starting to get annoyed. I'm like, what? Why are we playing this? After all that's happened, why are we playing this mundane life sim? The Western Sims. And then it hit me. It's like everything we did as Arthur, all the sacrifice Arthur did, was for these mundane moments, for John and Abigail. The fact they don't have to look over their shoulder for people trying to kill them in Blackwater, and that they can just enjoy themselves as a couple, is the very thing Arthur fought for. This mundane life sim was us living through the reward for Arthur. This is what Arthur wanted for John, and I kind of respect that the game doesn't give a shit what the player wants at this point. I think this was all personified in John finally proposing to Abigail on that beautiful boat ride. A beautiful boat ride where she wasn't held at gunpoint, remember? Either way, the fact that he could do this with no hassle and using the ring that Arthur gave him, I think was the ultimate redemption for Arthur. But the tranquility is short-lived. John meets up with Sadie, who's now a badass bounty hunter, and she's found the location of Micah's hideout. This is information you know that John can't ignore. This is the final redemption act for Arthur, for himself, for the Vanderling gang. It's some information he cannot ignore. Sadie, John, and Charles ride out to finally confront Micah. And it's all going well and you feel pretty damn confident up until Charles starts muttering some positive shit, which you know makes me nervous. Charles just starts talking about the new life he's gonna lead, and yet, surprise, surprise, Charles gets shot. We reach Micah and we're back into an old-fashioned hold 'em up again. And out from the shadows, walking out like a game show secret guest, it's Dutch.
Hello, son. Mrs. Adler.
Now Dutch has a gun on both Micah and John. And even though we spent about 80 hours in this campaign, you as a player still don't truly know where Dutch's head is actually at. I have no idea at this point if he's going to go for John or Micah. I mean, we did play Red Dead 1 before this, so there's a little inclination of how this is going to go. But this isn't the sweet-talking Dutch we're used to. Clearly, that interaction with Arthur really affected Dutch because he's still this silent, brooding type, a complete 180 from what he used to be. It is tense, and setting up this kind of suspenseful narrative ending is just so masterfully done by Rockstar here. And in a split second, it all goes down. Dutch finally shoots Micah, and to finish it off, we dead-eye him in the face. God, that felt good, putting a bullet in that wild mustache. This was the last bite of the Vanderling gang, and like that, with no more words, Dutch walks past John and gives him a look to say, we're done now, I'm done now, the gang's done now, you're dead to me. Now the thing about that look is that is the starting bookend to the end bookend of Dutch at the cliff with John in Red Dead Redemption 1. Notice the difference. In this moment, Dutch's face is stern. He still has an element of power to him. He's just broken as a man. But in Red Dead Redemption 1, he doesn't have the stern expression. He has a sad, fearful expression. Bloodshot eyes. He is at the end here. both in the snowy mountains, and both in front of John. It's crazy because you can almost tell what the fate of the gang was by just looking at those two expressions of Dutch. So what did all these stories tell me? Basically that you can have a bad past, but you can always move positively forward. The fact that Arthur hyper-focused on John's escape fast-tracked Arthur's soul to actually redeeming itself. And John, looking at how Arthur acted, then did the same for his own family and was able to redeem himself despite thinking that he could never ask from God for anything good. And Red Harlow may have leaned into the revenge thing a little too much because he just murdered a lot of people for that. So, which story was best? Recently, there's been so many games that I buy now that, to be honest, sometimes I'm waiting for them to end. I have a compulsion with games to at least beat the story. I'm not quite, I don't have to do the platinum trophies, but I need to beat the story. And there's been so many games where I'm just waiting for it to end so I can beat the story, trade it in for another game with addictive gameplay, but no story again. The Red Dead series, I did not have this trouble, and every single one, Revolver, Red Dead 1 and 2, and Undead Nightmare, there was no point where I wanted it to end, I just wanted it to keep on going. Which makes it harder to conclude which story was best, but the way I'm doing this in my head is I'm separating them into two camps, okay? You've got the two games that focus, I'd say, more on gameplay and just are really fun games to play. It is, of course, Revolver and Undead Nightmare. I think if you take away the story elements, these games are the funnest to just pick up and play and will give you the best fun time. And we got the other camp, the camp where the hard-hitting stories are, and that's of course Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. So, we can put aside Revolver and Undead Nightmare. Put them aside as not the best stories, but definitely one of the best games. I'm not putting them away because they're bad. Oh God, please play these games. Now, I think the best way to decipher which is best is to really look at the main protagonists, John and Arthur. Now, John's story, in my opinion, has more overall weight to it. His family is hostage. He's having to hunt down the gang that used to be his family. This must be so much emotional weight, and you do feel it as a player. And then we got Red Dead Redemption 2 story and Arthur's story. Now, the thing is, Arthur's story is much more introverted and contained, like within the gang and within himself. It's not as consequential as John's story. John is literally in a pivotal moment when the West is changing into an industrialized society and he's being left behind. Whereas Arthur is going through some existential shit because he got tuberculosis. But I gotta say, the way that each game delivers the story is very different. Red Dead Redemption 1 has a deeper, more impactful story, as I said, but it is more focused on gameplay and kind of having fun at the same time, which makes the story a bit more diluted. Also, you don't have the context of Red Dead Redemption 2 yet, back in the day, so the story is a bit kind of broken, like it's a lot of stuff is unanswered. Now, Arthur's story in Red Dead 2 is nowhere near as consequential as John's, but oh my God, does it delve in deep, and oh my God, do you go in for that ride. Through the sheer amount of detail and the way the game immerses you in Arthur's world, you really feel all of Arthur's thoughts and internal monologues and conflicts. Plus, you get to see how Dutch unravels as well. I think these are the two main story beats that really dragged me in. Dutch's demise and Arthur's redemption. So for me personally, just for the story alone, the amount of detail and the way it immerses you in that story, no matter how big or small it is, I'm going to have to say Red Dead Redemption 2 takes the crown. Just. And to be fair, once you've played Red Dead Redemption 2 and you play the Red Dead 1 story again, which some of you may have done recently as it's been released on PC finally, then Red Dead Redemption 1 story actually has way more depth if you think about it, because it's a conclusion to the Red Dead 2 story. There's a lot more weight. That scene with Dutch on the cliff edge, so much heavier once you play Red Dead 2. Look, I'm going to give the crown to Red Dead Redemption 2. Just the pure mastery of the storytelling was what actually won it over for me. Well, here we are at the end. I suspect 10 of you may have reached here, and if so, I really appreciate it. Even if you just had me on in different stages during work, I really appreciate you watching this. This was such a journey for me and probably cemented these as my favorite games of all time, which in this stage of my life, this late in my gaming career, is quite a thing to say. I think if anything, this has given me an appreciation of just the mastery of craft Rockstar has for producing narrative-driven games. I'm Paddy Longlegs, and I f***ing hate Bill Williamson. Stay classy.
So will you ride with me? So will you ride with me? So would you ride? So will you ride with me? So will you ride with me? So will you ride with me, boy? So please, will you ride with me? So please, will you ride with me, boy? Saddle up. This is an account of someone who's experiencing these games for the first time. This is